Going live. All right. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Shannon, are you here? I'm
I
here.
am
You're
here.
here.
You
My
can hear
goodness.
me?
I can hear you. Can everybody hear us?
I hope so.
I hope so. I guess we'll find out pretty soon here. So
Uh-huh.
Shannon, what's up? What are we doing?
We get to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Not like, in between other times when we talk to everybody.
Well, I mean, that's like always, right? Well, for you
Right.
anyway, and not necessarily for me.
Yeah.
This is our quarterly live Q&A for the Glassbox podcast. So everyone who's watching now, everyone who's watching in the past, or everyone who is listening to this on the Patreon exclusive feed, the high definition audio version of it, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with us. Shannon, we have a list of questions from our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/glassboxpod. And we're fixing to answer a few of these questions, these burning Qs. We got some fiery A's for your burning Qs. So, Shannon, if you want to get started with a couple of questions to begin with, I'll get everybody set up and get a link to our patrons so that the people who make it so we can make this show can join us during the hangout.
There we
That's
go.
super awesome.
Yeah. Good plan.
All right, cool.
Okay, so T. Getty Atten Roberts, who's, I have to say, that is my hands down favorite nom de plume. So whoever you are, perfection. Okay. First question is, why are we so awesome? Well, it's because we are, we're the Glassbox podcast. That's why. We're Bryce and Shannon. Yeah. Okay. All right. Second question.
Can we get a hard question now, finally? My goodness.
I know. How do you manage relationships with family and close friends when their churches/cult beliefs are clearly more important to them than their respect for you as a person? Now, in context, for example, this individual says, when I was coming out as trans, my father literally searched the church website for the latest policies before he could decide how to react, which I was just like, ugh. Okay, this makes me want to strangle your father, just so you know. I have no doubt that we would be much closer or more distant now if that website said something different at the time. It does change occasionally, but I doubt that he will. And both my parents treat it like they think it's an expression of love to say, you will always be my son to me. Yeah. Okay. I think I've gotten a little bit easier than many others because my TBM family members don't want to talk to me about this. And in fact, the sibling I'm closest to is very, very TBM, but she doesn't talk to me about it. She will talk to my daughter about some of my stuff and be like, okay, if Shannon's pro-life or pro-choice, does that mean she wishes that her son was aborted or what? And I'm like, no, that's not what it means. And, but, I was like, why are they asking my daughter instead of me? And so in some of those things, it's a little bit harder. My dad, our relationship has actually gotten better over time, even though I know it really hurts him to think of me out, but he also doesn't talk to me about that. And so I don't know fully what's really going on with him there. I know it hurts him because he has said to one person that he says he now understands how God feels because a third of his children have left. And I don't know. There's subjects I don't bring up with him, but if he brings up stuff to me, like he'll start talking about Joseph Smith or something, I don't start arguments with him. I don't agree with him. I just let him talk, and I'm like, that's actually a really interesting point, Dad. Thanks. And then when I can, I'll change the subject, and that's about as far as it goes. And so, but then again, others that are more highly judgmental, I don't have that much to do with as it is. So it's a balancing act, I guess. I don't know. How about you, Bryce?
I think balancing act is the perfect way to describe it, right? Because I am similar to you that I try my hardest to not approach a conversation with a loved one in such a way that they will feel ambushed by it, which is one of the hardest things to do, because they're already like, they know who I am, or they know enough about me that they think every conversation is probably going to be adversarial or whatever. And I don't want it to be. I don't want that to happen. I want us to have an honest conversation and actually relate and see each other eye to eye. But those are super hard to have, especially when people are approaching the conversation already defensively. So it is so much a balancing act of trying to keep people in a state of mind where they're willing to have a conversation, have a discussion, but also not offend them, not cause them to put up the barriers, right? So like, I think most of the navigation of conversations with loved ones boils down to whether or not you can keep your cool when they say something that that they are just trying to get a rise out of you, or whatever the case is. And that's a lot harder, or a lot easier said than actually done.
Yes, it is.
And what that amounts to at the end of the day is largely, for me anyway, is just avoiding the conversations altogether. And that's, I wish there was a more simple solution, but there just largely isn't. It's just hard when you know that the person you're talking to is somebody who you share blood with and probably have a long, complicated history with, but there's this huge thing that is causing a conflict that's a wedge between you two, but you can't talk about the wedge, because then that just causes even more problems and friction. Balancing act is the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And I think too that there's varying levels of difficulty depending on what the issue is. I mean, it's like with T. Gannett and Roberts here, talks about coming out as trans, and I think about one family member who came out of the closet and had to deal with his father saying, "I'm such a failure as a father," who is a bishop, and I think with the LGBTQ plus issues being such a hot spot when it comes to Mormonism, those already are going to be a very much more emotional reaction. And so that's also a difficulty. But then again, I don't know. I mean, my dad got mad at my brother for drinking alcohol around his kids and called him core whore. And my TBM sister's just like, I think that's Shannon who's core whore, but didn't say it to him. She said it to my daughter when she's talking about what had happened that time. And she's like, Shannon's the core whore, not him, And so I don't know. I guess it depends on what the issue is. But also it depends on how deeply into the cult the parents and the family are. Because like with this one, where his father was looking on the church website to find out how he's supposed to react. And I'm like, you are a fucking asshole as a father. You're a failure if you have to have a religion tell you how to react to your child. So.
But doesn't that illustrate the mindset though? And with inculcating this concept of authority so deep into the mindset of the members, it's like, if I don't have an authoritative source or an authority to go to for answers to all of my questions, then what?
Yeah.
Then what do I do? Right. The church is very effective at teaching a complete and utter total lack of autonomy in its people, and complete dependence on the structure and the concept of authority to begin with, that it makes it a significant challenge to overcome those things. And when somebody is looking for an authoritative answer and there isn't one, well, hopefully that can open the door for a conversation, but I don't know. Well, I think there's a question in the YouTube chat that illustrates this point. This is from Brian. It says, how can so many highly educated Mormons believe in completely nonsensical claims made by Joseph Smith in the Mormon Bible, devoid of any evidence, archaeological, etc.? Well, hey, hey, smart people listen to what other smart people say. Yeah. And when you're taught your entire life that the smartest people are the people in the ivory tower in Salt Lake, and they talk to God, the smartest creature ever, you might just listen to what they have to say.
Right.
Stuff.
So, okay, on an easier question, Bryce, this comes from Julie. What monster could Clank easily vanquish?
Insider joke for the one person, Julie, who's watching this stream that also plays in that D&D campaign. So Clank is a ranger, archer that I play. What can Clank vanquish? Well, recently she had a fight with a rock and impaled it in the back of a skull with a dagger, and that was pretty badass. Yeah, who knows? She just killed a dragon with the help of her friends. Shannon, you may feel sad to hear that we killed a dragon, but we did.
That's rude.
I know, it's horrible. So it's hey, you know what? Just about anything you throw a Clank, either she's gonna kill it or she's gonna get killed by it. We won't know until the dice say. A great question, Julie.
She also wants to know what your favorite heavy metal, aka devil music, artist and album.
Oh no. That Shannon, what's your favorite classic literature?
I know.
What's your favorite musical?
That's
Isn't
like
that
asking me that kind of question. What's your favorite movie, Shannon?
What's your favorite movie, right? What's anybody's favorite book? What's anybody's favorite anything? That there's like such a huge abundance of selection. So I'm like, I am a person who's like, I like a specific feeling and a specific subgenre for a specific mood. If I'm like brooding on my past and I want to, I want to headbang my head through my keyboard, I'll throw on some Chelsea Grin, an ex-Mormon band from Utah, and just an excellent band. Seen them live so many times, and one of the best composers for lyrics I've ever read and listened to. So that's a good one. But then if I'm driving and I want to just like sing along to the metal, that sounds ridiculous when I say it. That's when I go into something like Impending Doom or Immure or Attila or something like that. Some of like the more, I don't know, bubblegummy, less thought-provoking type of bands. But I mean, we can, you know what, this is only interesting to me and maybe one person who listens to metal, and I can talk on this for 45 minutes, so I'm just going to stop it there.
Okay. So if you want to move into stuff I can talk for 45 minutes on. Julie asked, what is your ranking of the Jane Austen novels? So, all right, for me, when it comes to Jane Austen, I might surprise people, I don't know. But for my favorites, the top, first one would be Persuasion. And then the second, very close second, so like 1.3, would be Lady Susan. And it's kind of funny because Lady Susan is one of her earliest novels. She wrote it in 1794. And she was born in 1775, by the way. And she died when she was 41. So it was 1817. I can't remember, something like that. But she didn't start actually publishing till she was 35. Lady Susan, she wrote as a teenager, and it is the snarkiest thing written. It's not very well done. It's not her best one, but I like the story itself because I think it showed more of her personality, because she was really a snarky, sarcastic little bitch sometimes. And Persuasion is actually the last one she wrote fully, and it was published after she died. And I like that one also because that's her gentlest. And most of hers are kind of a harsh look on things. She's got a sarcastic sense of humor in them. And then next would be Pride and Prejudice. Next after that would be Mansfield Park. And then last would be Northanger Abbey and Emma. A lot of people think of Emma as one of her best. And actually, I don't like that one. I mean, Northanger Abbey is Jane Austen's nod to Gothic novels, because they were the bane of everyone's existence then, and young women were always reading them, and everybody's like, horrors, it's like porn now or some shit like that. And she liked to read them, and so she wrote a tongue-in-cheek version of it just because, with Northanger Abbey. And but yeah, Emma I don't like, because I think Emma's a pain in the ass. But I mean, all of her books have the same kind of theme to them. And I do like them because they present Regency society extremely well. And I don't know, they're rather interesting. And I mean, the next question that Julie asked is, what do I think of the Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice? And I have a lot of favorites on those, the movies and the miniseries. And I own, I think, 6 different versions of it in film. And that one is like 4th down the list. Actually, I'm not overly fond of that one. There's a few things in it I like a lot. Bryce, actually, you know what? Bryce, turn your sound off. Bryce, I've got Bryce reading it, but he doesn't like any kind of
don't like the spoilers. So.
He doesn't like the spoilers. So I told him, I says, okay, you just go and, you know, turn off your sound for a minute while I talk about this. All right. With the Keira Knightley version, there are aspects of it I like, but as an overall, I don't. Things like, I love how Mrs. Bennet is played in it, because one of the things with Jane Austen novels and Regency time period itself is the use of subtlety, particularly subtle insults and everything else. I mean, what we in our 21st century minds see as subtle, they saw as extremely overt. And so it's like in Pride and Prejudice, when how many of you on here have actually read it? Oh, fuck you. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. There are so many subtle insults everywhere in there, but also so many people think of the initial insult from Darcy at the assembly, where he says she is not, when he refuses to dance with Elizabeth, and he says, she is not handsome enough to tempt me. I'm in no humor to give consequence to those who are slighted by other men. We think the insult is, oh, he called her ugly. That is not the insult. The insult is his refusal to give consequence to her, because in that society, he is of the highest consequence at the assembly. He's the largest landowner. He has the most money. His family has been owning this land for generations upon generations. The only ones next in consequence to him are the Bennets, because they've owned their land for generations. They just don't have as much money. And so for him to refuse to give consequence to her, that's the insult. But we don't see it that way. So anyway, back to the Keira Knightley version. I love the way Mrs. Bennet is played, because it has to show us, and there's a line put into that film that is not from the book, is when Lizzie is like, is this all you think about? Because her mom is trying to find somebody for them to marry. She says, when you have 5 unmarried daughters, you tell me what you think about. That's not from the book, but that is precisely what defines Mrs. Bennet. And the other thing is the way Charles Bingley is played, because he's played as very simple-minded in it and needing to have somebody tell him what to do all the time. He is somebody who needs to be told what to do, but what we see in that makes it so it makes sense, because he's not a strong person. He's led by his sister. He's led by his friend, those kind of things. So anyway, these books, though, they show Regency society extremely well. And they give us that viewpoint of what Regency society was like for women, and especially women of the gentry who don't have a lot of money, because that's what happens in every single one of the books. So anyway, okay, Bryce, I'm done. So the next question she asked me is, what's my favorite musical? And holy shit, that is a question I'm like, oh, you're asking me another thing like that. Now, when it comes to actually any musical, that's changed since leaving the church for me. And it's been, in fact, there's some of them I've been refusing to even go and watch because I'm afraid of how I'll react to them. And that's because so many musicals that were favorites of mine have so much toxic masculinity in them. And that's things like My Fair Lady and most of Rodgers and Hammerstein. And especially, things like 7 brides for 7 brothers, which in my family was always a big deal because that was what my parents went to on their first date. I can't stand that fucking film. And I just am like, this is the worst thing ever. They're depicting the rape of the Sabine women, for fuck's sake. Okay. But there's a lot of those. It is really difficult for me. But also you got things like, Phantom of the Opera, which is fantastic music. Absolutely fantastic music. But I hate the story. I'm not a fan of Gothic novels anyway. But with this one, for the Phantom, he's this murderous stalker, for crying out loud. And we're supposed to feel sorry for him? And then he gets away in the end. He never has to pay for what he's done. He can just go off and do it again. I'm like, fuck you. Okay. But I mean, the music's beautiful, but I just don't like the story. Les Miserables, I do love, and there's a lot of things I love. And in particular, the version I like best is the film version with Hugh Jackman. And part of that is because filming the music live was so well done, because the emotions of the songs comes through better than you get on stage. Because, stage you have to project. A whisper has to be done loud enough to be heard in the last seats, kind of thing. On film, you've got a boom mic that's sitting just barely outside a camera, and it picks up everything. And so you can bring in those emotions, and those emotions are there in the songs. But the other reason why I love it the most is because of how the prostitutes are portrayed in it. Every stage version I've seen, those scenes with the prostitutes are made as the comic relief. But in this film, they aren't. They're a part of that society that was there. And these women are put into it because that's all they can do. And you see Fantine when she's brought in, and you see them, these women, they're harsh, they're hard, they're, very cynical about life, but they also know what it's going to be for her. And they know that the easiest way for her to adjust is for her to just dive into the deep end immediately. And that's what they help her do. It's actually a very loving, harsh, loving scene in that film. And I was so happy they portrayed it that way, because that to me made it much better film than I've ever seen it done. And so, but some other musicals I love are like Hairspray. I mean, the newer one is the one I like best rather than the old one, because you got Queen Latifah in there. And she's fantastic. And John Travolta playing Edna was just wonderful. I loved her. But there's also others, like a Bollywood version of Bride and Prejudice, which I love. But Into the Woods is always fantastic. And the best part of Into the Woods is the one line where the prince says, "I was raised to be charming, not sincere." So anyway, those are all things that I love about those musicals. There's probably others I like too, but those are the ones I can think of right now. Okay. Like I said, I could go on forever.
Off the top of your head, Shannon.
That lasted like 20 minutes? There we go. Okay. All right. So David Shea. This is for Bryce. And also with this one, I'm going to give these 2 questions, one from David Shea and one from Will, because they're sort of tied together. So David Shea said, since leaving the Mormon church, there's been a few times something has just blown my mind. One of them was your theory of Joseph Smith using and distributing entheogens in the early church. Could you explain how you came up with the theory, and could it be proved somehow? Can't wait for you to write a book about it. Intent. And Will says, what's the latest in your work on the entheogen theory? Listening to Mormons on mushrooms and recent experiences have led to believe that in the mind of a person like Joseph Smith, i.e. flexible and pragmatic relationship with the truth, that's Joseph Smith, his visions, revelations, translations, and endowment ceremony all become both more plausible and less authoritative, i.e. because he was just tripping. So what have you got for us, Bryce?
And by the way, you should guest on Mormons on Mushrooms. Continue.
Okay. I got an email to answer. So yeah, to start it off, when how I kind of stumbled on it was through just doing the episode. I was reading through the accounts of the Kirtland Temple dedication ceremony, as well as the couple of weeks leading up to it, with all of the washings and the whiskey, the cinnamon whiskey that they poured over themselves, and like, yeah, I mean, they were throwing ragers and partying until 3 a.m. right? So like, it just seems like, well, that's really odd. Maybe the visions and ecstasy that they were experiencing was related to the partying that they were doing that night, when the heavens were opened up to them. And so I essentially said it on the podcast, and just kind of in passing, tongue in cheek almost. And then I got an email from Cody Nakoni, who, I worked with him to put this all together. And he sent me the Robert Beckstead article, Restoration in the Sacred Mushroom, as well as a copy of Hearts Made Glad, which was the book from 1970s, I want to say, by then General Authority Lamar Peterson. And it just tried to deal with the charges of intemperance against Joseph Smith and the early church. And essentially he just put the pieces together, that if you read Hearts Made Glad and think about maybe it's not just alcohol that they're drinking there, then all the visions make more sense. And so after reading that book, and then reading the article that he sent me, he and I worked together to write the article that we self-published for the Sunstone presentation in 2017. That kind of laid the groundwork for all of this, and built off of Robert Beckstead's work. So that's kind of how I stumbled on it. It was, I mean, really, it was just a stumbling, like, oh, this just sounds like drugs. And then somebody was like, hey, it was probably drugs. And then we just started looking at it. So could we actually prove it? I don't think so, right? Unless you have a bottle of sacramental wine that you could verify came from the Kirtland Temple dedication ceremony, which they were using barrels. So you wouldn't have that. But you had a bottle of sacramental wine that you could verify was in the possession of Joseph Smith in Kirtland or whatever, and it's been preserved and unopened all of this time. And then you immediately, took it out, you pulled the cork out for the first time in 180 years. Then you took a sampling of it and, chemically analyzed it to see if there are indeed psychedelics in it. Short of something like that, or short of like a medicinal, a materia medica book, or a vegetable medicine book of the time that has Joseph Smith's handwritten notes about his recipes, or what he would have done to tweak this or add more of that to take some of that away. Short of those two pieces of evidence, I don't think it could ever be definitively proven, which makes it very hard to present in a historically sound way. Because at the end of the day, if there's no single piece of evidence that is likely available that would prove the thesis, then it's nothing more than glorified thought speculation. And that's hard for any historical community or any scientifically based community, especially social sciences, to jump on board with. Which means that I have to, in my writing since self-publishing that 2017 article, I have taken a far more academic and less sure approach to it, and am merely placing it up as a realistic hypothesis that I think holds explanatory power. And the community is going to have to deal with it, and they are starting to deal with it in whatever way they are going to deal with it. As far as progress on it goes, that's kind of a tough one, because I'm currently in the works. Well, we just got back a revise and resubmit on an article that we were really hoping would finally make it through into the JWHA, but it needs some work still, unfortunately, for the reviewers to say it's good enough. So we have to do a bit of editing on that article. And these first steps are getting out more articles on the topic, and then slowly taking those articles, as well as the feedback to those articles, incorporating them into the full-length book when it is finally ready to be published, which it is not. It is a long ways off, unfortunately. So yeah. Does that answer all of the prongs of the questions? Anything we can do to help? Wow, that's a tough one. Share Mormons on mushrooms with your friends. Share the presentation with your friends. Get more people talking about it, because the more people that are talking about it, the more people who are making a podcast exclusively about this, the more that the more that it enters the public square of conversation. And I view that as a good thing. The more people are talking about it, the more I can talk about it, the more that we can talk about it, the more we can refer to articles that are written by me and many other people, instead of just me and a few other people who have all worked together on this. I don't want to be the only person doing this research. So yeah, get the
more
word
people
out.
Doing it, the better anyway.
Yep.
Legitimately doing it, I should say.
Yeah. And as far like, can you help with research or anything? If you can find some way to boil information down into a syringe that I can just inject straight into my brain, yes. So develop the science for that, and then then come talk to me. Then we're good. We're good. That's gonna expedite a lot of processes in my life. But until that time, not really. Just spreading the word and talking more about it.
Yeah. Okay, so Will asked, what are our thoughts on secular spirituality? And that's actually an interesting question, because I think that especially for those leaving these really controlling churches like Mormonism and Islam and stuff, spirituality is such a loaded term. And I think there's so many of us leaving that we want to leave everything with religion behind. I mean, you see that so much, like people leaving Mormonism, they go and try every possible alcohol they can, and they try smoking, they do drugs, and they do coffee and tea and all that stuff, get 10,000 tattoos and, 27 piercings on their ears and stuff, because now they can, and they're leaving it and leaving it behind. And I think it's hard using the phrase spirituality, because we see it as something religious when it actually isn't. I mean, it's like with secular spirituality, it's emphasizing personal growth and inner peace, things like meditation and yoga and stuff like that all fit in with that. And so that's one, I think it is hard to separate the term. And in some ways, I almost wish it used a different term that meant the same thing, because it would be easier to consider, especially as an atheist, because I tend to now as an atheist think, oh, well, spirituality means God, so therefore it's nothing. But in essence, it really is. I think of it as something learning to focus in on the self and what your self needs. I mean, because there's so many people who talk about how they feel when they're out in nature, when they go out hiking, and when they're out in the trees or out in the flowers or whatever. And I think that's a lot of what secular spirituality is. But yeah.
I kind of take a similar approach, that I think that spirituality and religion should be disentangled, because the distinct differences between the two is spirituality is by definition a very flexible and fluid term, and religion by its definition requires ritualism and inflexibility in many regards. And I think that's largely why, especially younger people, younger generations, millennials and zillennials and newer, even younger, are like flocking away from organized religion and going with a more nuanced, like, oh, I'm spiritual, but I don't believe in like white bearded God or whatever, right? Like they are the younger generations now are introducing into the public lexicon the concept that religion and spirituality can be separate and distinct concepts. Right. And I think that is a very, very good thing, because there's all sorts of ways to attain spirituality. When I can tell that I am in a spiritually vulnerable state, which is to say that I feel like a yearning for some kind of a spiritual experience. And these words, once again, are very loaded, but just stay with me, right? When I feel a yearning for that experience, I know where I can go to satisfy those things, and then I have that satisfaction, and that is something that I don't find religion very useful for. But unfortunately, just by product of being where we are and living in the time and place that we do, religion largely has a monopoly on anything spirituality, and arguably defines a spirituality in a ways that defy the idea of like a flexible and fluid spirituality, and therefore they hold that monopoly, and it is going against convention to think of the concepts as distinct, when really I don't think that they need to be so deeply intertangled. It's just a matter of like, religion has had the whole market for a long fucking time, and now all we can do now is say, hey, you don't deserve this monopoly. I find, I can go out in the woods and learn more about God reading my Bible than you can if you go to church for 2 years or whatever, right? That's an old Joseph Smith quote, right? If you can find your spirituality in nature or at concerts or in spending very special time with a very special friend or a partner or whatever the case is, right? Like, you can find spiritual fulfillment that doesn't involve religion, or you can find fulfillment that does involve religion. I don't care, right? Like, just don't hurt people. Don't be a dick. Be nice. Be kind. Love everybody, and everything's cool. You can be as spiritual or as not spiritual as you want.
Right.
So, yeah. How do you approach it? Yeah. Whatever everybody wants. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. That is excellent. Okay. Will has also, what's our favorite productivity snack / caffeine? Oh God.
I want to answer this by tapping into something I was saying earlier, and that is ritualism. Oh yeah, I have a daily ritual set up because working from home, I think many of us have experienced this recently. Like, if you don't have some kind of a morning ritual to set you on a path to get stuff done that day, then it's really hard to get stuff done. So yeah, a little bit of ritualism, the way that I prepare my coffee in the morning, the time that I wake up, the time that I, dress or, shower, clean myself, and not just be a vagabond living in a house. So having ritualism allows me to be productive, of course, with lots of caffeine. Lots of caffeine.
Yeah. Mine's the entire carafe of coffee. Yes. Oh God.
What about you, Shannon?
Yeah, coffee. And then in the evening, it's usually like Dr. Pepper Zero mixed with a berry Cascade ice drink, or Mountain Dew Zero. I hate being diabetic at times, mixed with some kind of Cascade ice. I like Cascade ice because it does have sugar in it, and it's the only way I can get a grapefruit flavor. Side note, since I can't eat grapefruits because that's my favorite fruit, because of stupid medications I'm on. Okay. All right. I'm going to quit whining about that. All right. Will asked, we have all seen how modern religious apologetics is about holding space for a miraculous explanation when religious truth conflicts with observed truth. I see Mormonism's apologetics demonstrating a pattern I assume is used by elite members, leaders and generational stock, who appear to hold the conflicting truths simultaneously, which is so weird, Anyway, what I want to know is, to what extent, if any, do you see Mormonism's founding theology as contributing to this? Or in other words, is this type of dual truthiness, doublespeak, a feature, not a bug of Mormonism? Will, you ask really deep questions.
Yeah. Well, we have the pleasure of Will being on the chat here, or on the call with us. I actually want to hear what you think about your own question, Will, before we try and hedge some answers, if you're willing to contribute.
Okay, so sorry,
well, sure,
I was just saying.
Will. Wait. Oh, yeah. You got the best
Look
shirt
at
on.
that. Oh,
I got the shirt, hold on, and the mug.
Woo-hoo. Oh,
and the
you
mug
are
too.
awesome.
And Zoom is doing a great job of blurring them,
blurring
like
out my
sensitive
bedroom
material. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I was just telling in the chat, I have not enough people to talk to this about, apparently. That's why my questions are so deep. But so basically, like, I was kind of wondering, like when I was in the church, I was really like an activist in democratic politics, and so like I basically had to hold conflicting views all the time, and like I got really used to it, and it didn't bother me. And then like fast forward till a couple, I don't know, probably within the last year, very high on some plant medicine, and I just thought like everything, like the church, like Joseph Smith's family system theory, which is Dan Vogel, he was into explaining that like a lot of what Joseph Smith did was trying to like save his family. Like there's a lot of evidence that he brings up about Joseph Smith's attitudes towards Alvin, and how his mom was Methodist and how his dad was a Unitarian, and those are like opposite theologies. Like one is heaven and hell, and one is everyone gets saved. And Mormonism has those two beliefs. There's the heaven and hell stuff. Like I'm not going to get all into it, but then there's the everyone will be saved in these three different degrees of glory. And it just kind of clicked to me that like this holding the opposite truths at the same time has been, I feel like, has been there since the beginning. And like that's how Joseph Smith was such a kind of a deceiver, because it was like that was his life was always about saying one thing when it was convenient and then saying the other thing when it was convenient and the other thing. And I just wonder if that's like, I don't know, the really high part of me was thinking like, is that something that's like distinct? Is that like Mormonism as a religion's like unique offering to American like Christian sects overall is just like being able to lie about it? Because like we sell things, and then like the church PR department, especially when I was like in the Democratic Party, like I was always mad with the words that they chose, because they, behind closed doors, I heard the opposite, and then public facing they would say the thing I didn't want them to say. So I just, Bryce, since you've read all of that stuff, knowing Joseph Smith way more than I do, because I just listen to your stuff, do you think that there's kind of something to that dualism?
I think there's a misunderstanding with the way that people, specifically members of the church, approach their own church, and when it comes to their understanding of Joseph Smith. And what I mean by that, I mean that's just kind of like a bullshit line to say, so let me put some meat on those bones. Joseph Smith was somebody who, in my opinion, was capable of thinking on the fly very quickly in order to solve an immediate problem. And that many of his decisions that were made were in order to solve something that was going on very immediate in his world. Whereas when it comes to the modern Mormon interpretation of the restoration, it's this idea that the church is like Joseph restored the church. And now that it is restored, we have the fullness of the gospel. And I mean, this was one of my first kind of shelf items when I was growing up, was that it wasn't just like April 6th, 1830, the church was started and they had the endowment and they had the priesthood offices and they had they had everything that we experience in the modern church today at the beginning. Because when you restore something, you fucking restore it. The whole thing, whatever it is, you grab the thing and you restore it back to what it was when it was originally created. But understanding that there was developments along the way kind of belies that concept of restoration. So in order to answer that, they have this concept of ongoing restoration, which intermingles deeply with ongoing revelation. So Joseph Smith was capable of being the type of personality, and we all know these people, whether they're public figures or our friends and family, who just are not tethered to reality. Reality just doesn't seem to matter. And what they said today doesn't seem to have any relationship to what they said yesterday. Those people just exist. And it's odd how some of those people can be very charismatic and cult of personality type of leaders. They can be very magnetic type of people. So Joseph had that X factor that was magnetic, and also had the personality of somebody who was capable or was able to identify what the best thing for him to do at the moment was, and was capable of making those decisions without any regard to what had happened just the day before, or the week before, or a theological constraint that was created in his Book of Mormon didn't seem to matter when he was making revelations for the Doctrine and Covenants or the Book of Commandments or whatever. So when we look at contradictions within the gospel that requires apologetics, I don't regard that as something that was like Joseph Smith thought one thing and then he thought something new, and that was like a theological development or an evolution. I view it as Joseph Smith believed in what he believed in that very day, and that's all that mattered to him. And that causes apologists and people today, even non-apologists who are studying this theology, to wrap themselves all up in all sorts of twisted knots, because we're trying to reconcile these things within a transcendent concept of the gospel that's supposed to be timeless and immutable, and justify that through the lens of one guy who was making all the decisions for the theology of Mormonism, who was not tethered to reality. So how do we deal with that? Well, we explain away the contradictions. We say that the contradictions aren't important, or we say that ongoing restoration, ongoing revelation, whatever is the newest is the truest. And that seems to be exceptionally useful in making this colossus of a religious machine surprisingly adaptable. Bruce Lee would be proud. So yeah, it's very complicated, and that's a long rambling non-answer to the contradictions that require apologetics.
Right. It's one thing I thought of too is, and I don't know how this was for other people, but when I was growing up, what I would hear at church and at home is that true science, the rules of true science were the rules of God. And so anything, that God created or whatever else was done through the rules and the laws of science. But yet they also, things like Thomas Murphy, when he did his study on mitochondrial DNA in hopes of proving the claims of the Book of Mormon, and instead proved that they were false claims, the church didn't back him up saying, oh, well, this was done scientifically and peer reviewed and all this shit. No, they said, you deny it or we're kicking you out of the church. They made him the modern Galileo. And so I think this is one of those, for me anyway, which was really an issue, is to keep hearing stuff of, well, yeah, we believe in science and the rules of science as long as it agrees with what we're doing, but not vice versa. And so that's a problematic one.
I think Will said it perfectly in chat. It's like if 200 years from now, people were trying to explain a cohesive, consistent narrative of Trump's Twitter timeline. Yeah. How fucking perfect is that? That's exactly it, right?
Yeah. That's it. Yep. Yeah. Ugh. Okay. Now, here's 2 questions for me that are kind of tied together. David Shea asked, did you have a classic shelf break when you detached from Mormonism, and what was your journey out? And Rick asked, you have told us about your special experience a decade ago. Tawdry euphemisms are so much fun in our Exmo culture. So in other words, 10 years ago, I finished cancer treatments. And he says, was that episode in your life a catalyst to explore your Mormon foundations more deeply than before, or had you already long since crossed such lines? Now, this is fun. I could go on for 3 hours about this. Okay. I won't, but I could. All right. There's a few things from before that had happened that were doubts that were hard to keep locked away in my Pandora's closet. And one of them was some of the stuff I'd heard about Paul H. Dunn, and that he had lied completely, even though I remember when his statement came out in, what was it, the early 90s, 91-ish or something like that, where he's like, well, I might have fudged a little on my stories, but I was trying to be truthful and all this. And the church is like, oh, well, it's hard not to fudge a little on stories. And so I believed that. I just thought that a few details here and there were off, and I didn't really look into it, but it still kind of bothered me because, we keep hearing, in Book of Mormon and all these teachings, liars will be thrust down into hell, and the Lord cannot look upon the sin with any degree of allowance, and all that shit. Okay, so I had that going on, and these were quietly happening, but I was still trying to be a true believing member. And then the cancer happened. Now, before that, I was incredibly sick and had been for a while. I wasn't always able to go to church, but I also wasn't able to do much of anything. Because, before, right, 2 months before we found out I had cancer, we found out I was diabetic, and it was really bad. I was like a walking popsicle, because, my blood sugar, if you understand what this means, my A1C, which is tracking my blood sugar for 3 months, was something like 900 something, which, it's like solid sugar kind of thing. So anyway, then we found out I had cancer, and it was a long, slow growing tumor that I'd had it at least 15 years, possibly more. And so my brain wasn't always working perfectly then. And so I wasn't really thinking through a lot of things I even should have been. So then I start cancer treatment. Now, when you do chemo, it kills everything in your body, practically, your entire immune system, everything else, takes you to the brink of death in hoping to kill this thing that's in you that's trying to kill you. And so you have to avoid people that are sick, which that means church, because nobody stays home when their kids are sick. They come so they don't have to deal with their kids. And so I went to church in the 10 months of my treatment. I went to church maybe a handful of times. And that meant I was away from the brainwashing. I wasn't at the temple, and which was also good. And things changed because once you're not being brainwashed every Sunday, suddenly you pull back further and further, and you start looking at things clearly. And so the whole Paul H. Dunn thing was still running through my head. And the thing for me is, I grew up in the 80s. I was a teenager in the 80s. I followed everything he wrote. I went to every fireside I could go to. I would listen to General Conference hoping he would be asked to speak. I had his cassette tapes. I had his books. I had it all because I always felt the Spirit every time he talked. And I just knew all of this was true. And so it bugged me to no end that this, I couldn't lay it to rest because I kept thinking, but they said liars will be thrust to hell. How could he still be making us feel the Spirit if the Spirit only testifies to the truth? So in 2012, I got asked to speak and I decided to try it out. I was going to do my own little scientific experiment. And so I prepared my talk, and I spent the whole week with this talk. And I practiced this part, especially in front of the mirror. So I had it set down right. I'm going to demonstrate it to you. I tried talking about it on my first episode, but without watching me, it's really hard to really understand what I was talking about.
Question for you, Shannon. Do you have the actual talk still on an old hard drive or anything?
I hand wrote it. And I wrote out notes.
Oh, that's so baller.
I never wrote out the whole thing. I always wrote out like notes of tell this point, now this story, this point. So most of my talks were just memorized, really. So I don't know where it is. I wish I still had it, but
could be a fun little artifact for the annals of history.
If you find it, I think it would be so cool to see.
It would be, especially because of this part. But so yeah, I would make my point and I would share a personal experience about my point because I learned how to speak from Paul H. Dunn. And and that's what he would do, is use his personal experience to tell a point because stories work. Yeah. And so I was going along and I reached a point and I knew I had all the audience in palm of my hand. So then I got to this point and I was talking about this last part of my talk that I was going to do. And I says, and to illustrate this, I remembered this one experience I had. Okay. All right. Okay. When they signed me this talk and I was preparing it and I reached this point, I had this one experience come to mind and I thought, no, I've never talked about this. I don't think I can. No, I've never talked about it. No. These other ones will illustrate the same point, and I can, and I'll talk about those. But every time I worked on it all week, this same experience kept coming to mind stronger and stronger until last night. I finally just said out loud, no, I can't talk about this. This is sacred to me. And now I'm finding that when I try to talk about what I prepared, the Lord is stopping my mouth. So apparently somebody here really needs to hear what I have, this experience. So whoever you are, please, I beg you, please pay attention and learn whatever it is the Lord is trying to teach you, because this is really, really hard for me. God, stop laughing, Bryce.
It's laughing so perfect. There. I'm so happy.
It's so good.
It's so good.
And then, everyone was paying absolute attention to me. The only noise being made were the babies. The children were awake. Teenagers were awake. Everybody was focused on what I was saying. And I gave a completely beginning to end, side to side, all the way around, fabricated story. Not one bit of it was true. Not a single bit. Now, we all know, Mormon church, when you give a good talk, you hear about it. You might hear about it next week. Then it was a great talk. Well, for the next 17 Sundays, 1 to 3 people would come up to me at church and say, Shannon, that talk you gave and that experience you had, I think I'm the one that the Lord needed to hear that, because this is what's been going on with me. And they would give me these confessions. And I was just like, it's all fake. And I mean, I felt what I thought was the Spirit telling this, knowing full well I was lying beginning to end. And I was like, it's all fake. It's all shit. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'll just be physically in, mentally out. Because my husband still believed in everything. He was actually on deployment when this happened. And I felt there were so many things I felt from this too. Because I felt this tremendous thrill, because you always do when you connect with an audience like that. And knowing that I had that effect on the entire congregation like that 4 months later, I'm still hearing about it. That's a rush. But I also felt a level of shame, because all these people were confessing things to me and over a lie that I told them. And my conscience, it really all over the place with this one. And then also realizing that if I was a man, I could easily become a general authority, just like Paul H. Dunn was.
You could become a break-off faction, right?
There was so many things I could have been if I was a male priesthood holder. And there was so much of that, everything else. And so at that point, I was like, okay, that's it. And then, I got the book, Lying for the Lord, and all these things. Then in 2015, first of all, the Supreme Court Bergefell decision. And I was like, yay, good. This is great. Same-sex marriages are okay and they're legal and all this shit. And my nephew, one of my nephews, came out of the closet that summer, and I was so happy that he was finally able to do it. And I thought, this gives the church an out, because the temple covenant is you obey the law of chastity, which is that you have no sexual relations with anyone but the husband or wife whom you are legally and lawfully wedded to. And I was like, there it is. They can be legally and lawfully wedded. That gives the church a way of letting it go without having to actually make a statement. And then what did the church do? They made that asshole statement in November 2015. And that's when I got so angry I couldn't stay. That was when I was like, okay, that's it. That is absolutely it. They're not even that harsh on the children of polygamists. This is too much. And I know, I mean, my nephew had tried so many times to commit suicide over the years. And another nephew who has come out now since then, and he's already left the church. Both of them have, other people I know who are trans and others who are part of, the LGBTQ plus, and hearing and seeing the pain that the church has put him through. I couldn't stay. To me, I just couldn't. I could not be a part of that, even physically and mentally out. And that's also part of what led me into even being willing to do this podcast where I get to be core whore. And so anyway, so that's the main thing of what led me out. And so does that answer enough of it, Will? Or not Will, but Rick. Was that good? Okay. I can give plenty more stories of other shitty stuff, but those were really the big things. And yeah, me going through cancer treatment was a catalyst because it pulled me away long enough to be able to wrap my brain around reality, which is hard to do.
Very fascinating, really.
Thank you. Okay.
I think you illustrate a like one of many paths in the way that you had the intellectual your own scientific test. You had the intellectual break before there was the social issues break that caused you to be like, well, this is not okay, because for a lot of people, a number of my very close friends consider like 2008, like that was the break. That was when the church took a stand on something that they could no longer give their support to the church. And once Prop 8 caused them to say, this doesn't sound like God's church, is when they began doing the study of the intellectual stuff. So the social issue is what caused them to make the initial breakaway from the line. And you had a different approach in that you had an intellectual issue. Paul H. Dunn did this. That doesn't feel good to me. I'm going to try this, my own experiment. And then you're like, okay, so once you conducted your experiment, you had the results you were looking for. You decided, okay, well, I can be here, but not here. But then the social issue came along, and that's what caused, that was the final catalyst. Yeah. It's interesting how, I mean, we all have different paths out of this whole system, and we all have different catalysts and different shelf breakers, but I just find it interesting that different people prioritize different things in their lives that cause them to have that initial break. So yeah, it's just interesting, just commenting generally.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Oh, okay, let's see, where are we at here?
Where are we?
Tyler says, do either of you have other historical interests outside of Mormonism, and any religious ones in particular? Regency time period of Jane Austen, that's mine. But then again, part of that also does inform so much of what we have today, especially in the church, like purity culture. You can trace it back to a lot of the shit that went on then. They talk about a woman being compromised. If a man and a woman are alone in a room for 20 minutes, that can be considered a compromise and they'd be forced to marry. And if the man doesn't marry her, he gets away with you might be a rake. And she is condemned in the fucking society because, of course, it's all her fucking fault. And so, those kind of things. There's a lot of things with the Regency culture that fits right in with Mormonism and religious purity cultures and all that shit. And, Jane Austen was a snarky bitch, and I rather like that. Because I'm a snarky bitch, so, hey. What about you, Bryce?
Uh, oddly enough, when it comes to history, like Mormon history and therefore by extension 19th century American history kind of like grounds me. That's kind of the baseline that I come back to because I have the foundations and I have the personal attachment to it. But when it comes to history interests outside of that, I'm very much a shiny chaser, right? So if everybody doesn't mind me dragging down the mood for just a second, when Russia decided that they're going to invade Ukraine, it's like, all right, this is not an isolated act of aggression. Why did this happen? And that sends me down multiple rabbit holes of reading articles and watching lectures about the history of Russia, because I know so very little about it. So faintly, tiny bit. Almost all of it comes from Shannon doing The Naked Communist, right? So my history of Russia, it's almost non-existent. So learning about this and learning about the history of the USSR and its interactions with NATO and the larger dynamics of the global socioeconomic trends throughout the past 70 years since World War II is really, really interesting, because I can't look at the invasion as an isolated incident. I can't look at it without the context of larger NATO expansionism and EU expansionism and the contested natural resources that exist in Ukraine and the sense of patriotism and the love for the motherland that many of the Russians are fighting for. When there is a conflict and everybody around me has taken one side or the other of the conflict, I want to understand the conflict in totality. And that comes to anything from these larger, nations aggressing against other nations down to just, wedge issues in politics. I want to know the totality of these issues so that I can make my own informed understanding of it, which is very subjective anyway. So yeah, when it comes to history outside of Mormonism, I'm a shiny chaser. That's the best way I can summarize it. I see something shiny, I gotta chase it. I gotta find out where it goes. I gotta find what's at the end of that history rainbow, and I find a lot of fulfillment out of that. It helps me understand, I think, a surface level of a broad range of topics. It's a large puddle that's an inch deep. That's how I want to understand history. As best as I can when, I have a couple of really deep puddles that I explore in Mormon history. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Literally anything with history interests me. That's the best answer. I should have said that instead. Anyway, next question.
It is good. He also asked if we have heard of or read the Divine Comedy. And what? I have, but it's been forever ago. And it was back when I was an English major in college. Mainly we focused on the middle one, the Infernal, Dante's Divine Comedy. And then also I had sort of because it goes through the circles of hell. And I did kind of enjoy it because Princess Bride, the book, has the 7 levels of the pit of despair, and they didn't put all the levels in the movie, and they really should have, because that was kind of fun. That's one part where the book's better. Anyway, most of it, the movie's better, but yes, I did. But it's been a long time ago, and I'm actually glad you brought it up, because that is something I think will be interesting to read again. So now I've got to head to my notes of things I need to read. So, have you, Bryce?
No, I have not. No.
Have you heard of it?
Well, when you say Dante's Inferno, like that's in the lexicon. I know that, but no,
okay.
I have not.
It's basically like an epic poem in 3 parts.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's this descent into hell.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, let's see. Where was I? Let me get back to the questions. All right. What are the most embarrassing, sorry for what I said when I was Mormon, moments for you and any ex-Mormon ones? Oh God. My entire fucking mission. Oh God. Except when I argue with my companion about Mormon doctrine. The book. Oh, I have so many.
Man, that's a hard one to think of one on the fly.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Tyler submitted this question just as we were starting, I think. It's been like, oh fuck. Okay.
I know. Like what's Tyler's here. Tyler, you got one for us that you want to share? Maybe that'll prime the pump for Shannon and I.
Oh man. Not anything like I remember I did that thing where some missionaries, they say like they got a revelation that some girl was gonna marry them. Thank goodness I didn't like say it to her face. But I totally thought that for like a year when I was a teenager. And part of that is probably just like teenagers do dumb stuff, but that was pretty next level. So
oh God.
Oh, that's so good. That's so Mormon.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Oh God.
Because putting a God claim behind a teenager's idea of that is
this
it's an intensifier.
Where you're thinking with the wrong head. For me on my mission, this was one hard part when I was looking through my mission journals while we were doing a miracle of forgiveness, and it was just painful enough that I was wishing I dared tear these pages out of my journal. But where I was chastising my companions for not working hard enough, and how often I did that. And like with one, actually it's more than one, I think there are two, maybe three, where they were dealing with as much depression as I was. And yet I was standing there saying, you need to work harder. If you worked harder, you would feel better. You're letting Satan get at you and shit like that, even while I was feeling that shitty. And even at the point where I was ready to kill myself again, halfway through my mission, I was still doing that to a companion. That's incredibly painful to have to think about, because I don't know what kind of damage I caused. And, it's 1988, 89 when all that happened, and I don't know what's happening with them. So yeah, that's some of my worst.
Mine is not worst in that sense. Mine is just, I would have to think really hard to come up with something. I have said dumb shit a lot every day of my life, but I would just have to think, dredge deep into my memory banks to find one. The first one that comes to mind immediately is a little bit comical. This is the first time I had a sleepover at a friend's house, and this friend was not Mormon. And I remember being appalled that not only did he have a TV in his room, but his TV was also hooked up to cable. And I asked him, and he even had HBO. And I remember asking him, like, when he told me or was showing me the channels, I was like, aren't your parents worried that you're gonna watch porn? Like asking him, like, super down low, like low key. And he just laughed, because like he was raised in a completely secular household, and he just laughed. And if I remember his response correctly, he said, my mom doesn't care. And that line is like such an eye-opening experience to me, right? Because not only does this kid not have two parents in the house, he just has a mom. And not only does he doesn't go to church on Sundays, but he has a TV in his room with HBO, and they actually show boobies on there at night. And that's a revelation to me. And I realized like how Mormon I sounded at that moment, when he just laughed right in my face at it. Like, Like, it was such an absurd question. Now, for Mormons and growing up in Utah and everything, like, that's a totally reasonable ask. That's a reasonable question. Outside of Utah and outside of Mormonism, that's like, wait, why would your parents have a problem with you having a TV in your room? Is that a thing? No, like, it's just, it was such a, from my upbringing, from my parents' parenting style, from the church, from everything, it was appalling that his mom didn't care that he had access to the pornographies in his room. So that's the first thing that I can think of. I'll keep thinking on it. Maybe I'll remember something that's like, whoa, I can't believe I already said that. But nothing's coming to mind right now. I wish I had a better answer.
And of course, you have to remember that Mormons see things like Titanic as pornography.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 13 and saw that in the theater with my family.
Ooh. Ooh. And did they know that the scene was coming? Did they
Nope.
like try and shield? Oh.
How did they
So I just
react?
had to sit there and just be like,
I'm not looking.
I actually just saw a YouTube video the other day where it's this channel, they do short comedy skits, and it's like when you're watching TV with your parents and they start like undressing on TV. So he's like sitting on the couch and like it's showing his whole internal monologue. He's like, maybe I should cough to make it sound like I'm not paying attention. His dad's sitting right there and he's like doing all this stuff, like mentally, like, oh, maybe I should leave. No. And then finally he just goes, and then the dad turns around. He's like, you're liking this so much. Oh my gosh, you're so horrible. I had to send that. I'll have to share it. It was very good.
Yes, you will.
I need to find it again. I can't remember the
Oh
name of
my
the channel,
God.
but I'll find it pretty quick.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was, yeah, they're not Mormon, but the Midwest upbringing, there's some similarities.
Right. Right. Yeah, I got in trouble for letting my sister watch Dances with Wolves because, of course, you see his naked backside at one point. But yeah, my parents found out. I got in so much fucking trouble over that. She was like 14, 13, I think. And then later, I let my 16-year-old brother watch Silence of the Lambs, and that got even worse. Oh God. Yeah.
They show a lot more than a backside in Silence of the Lambs.
Oh my God. Silence of the Lambs. And it was R. Holy shit. You couldn't, and it was in their house. And my mom made me get rid of because I was living with them at the time. She made me get rid of every R-rated movie that I had. It was like this entire box full I had to get rid of, or else I had to move out of the house. And so,
Man.
yeah.
Oh.
That and Dances with Wolves, which I was like, this PG-13, Dad.
Can we talk about parents finding kids contraband? Because I have plenty. I'm sure all of us have those stories. My goodness.
That's the other thing is what was considered contraband.
Yeah.
By your parents, Mormon parents, it's one thing. Other parents, it's something, finding out their kids are stashing guns away or something, when they shouldn't, AK-47s in there and all this shit, or whatever. But for Mormons, it's, a PG-13 movie. Oh no, where's this pornography? We're going to make you go and see the bishop. Yeah. Yep. So yeah.
Yeah, being the black sheep in a Mormon family is a very, very different thing than being a black sheep in a non-Mormon family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Star
We have
Wars
our own quirks and
3.
features.
Tyler's the Star Wars 3. I was 15, but my brother was only 11, so PG-13 movies were evil. Yeah. It's so funny. My dad actually would let us watch some R-rated movies, just the violent ones. So it's like second First Blood movie, well, Rambo, the sequel. I saw that. My dad rented it. I saw it with him and my brothers and everything. And then mom's like, no. And then they came out saying that no R-rated movies in something like the for the youth pamphlet or for the strength of the youth pamphlet. They were like, teenagers shouldn't be watching R-rated movies, which man, everybody was
which
like,
decade
no.
was that pamphlet that you were referring to? Because they have tons of editions. I've tried to find in print
It's
from the
one of
church
the first
R-rated.
ones.
And
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
That was one of the early years. So this is back when it's still VHS. And let me think. I wasn't married. So we're talking like late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I did a deep dive in 2001 or so, 2001 on the church website. I'm like, okay, I keep hearing this R-rated movies thing. I'm searching everywhere on the church website. No mention of it anywhere. The For Strength of Youth pamphlet just said appropriate media. I'm like, well, if I'm watching a history film and that depicts some violence, then is it?
If I'm watching a film about Australia and it shows the Aborigines, is that porn or not?
I don't know. So
I don't know. If I'm watching the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice and they're showing a naked statue, is that porn?
And since I couldn't find anywhere in print from the church on the R-rated thing, I took it from that point forward as being folklore, and I decided that the MPAA was not God.
Right. Well, and that's the other problem. And I actually got in an argument with my dad about it, which I did not win because none of his kids won arguments with him. But where I brought up, I was like, it depends on who is in the committee each year, what the rating is. I says, because if you compare Last of the Mohicans to Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans is R, Dances with Wolves is PG-13. Dances with Wolves has a sex scene in it. You have a nude scene in it for him, full backside. You have also more swearing and all of that stuff. All that you have in a hell of a lot of violence as well, but all that you have in Last of the Mohicans is when Magua dies and he falls down and you get that blob of blood coming out of his mouth. I said, you get the same thing in Lady Hawk when the bishop dies, but that's PG. So it's all arbitrary by whoever the fuck is on the committee that year.
And how much they like the filmmakers.
Yeah, that too.
Big part of it.
How much the filmmakers lobbied for it. But he was like, then you have to get rid of that too. Yeah. I was like, all of that they cut from Last of the Mohicans to show in the BYU theater was just that final 2 seconds when Magua falls over dead. That's it. They didn't cut anything else, Dad.
Yeah, I had my children see Alien as their first R-rated film.
Oh, good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, it became a rite of passage because my older one, he saw it when he was 7. He's 12 now. And so my younger one, she's like, I want to see it. I want to see it. And so she finally got to see it. We went to the theater. They showed it at the Alamo Draft House here in North Carolina. And so she saw it in the actual theater. I had never seen it on the big screen. So that was fun.
So funny. My first R-rated film was Phantasm. And I was 16. And it's the first time I'd seen a horror film. And it completely freaked me out. I had nightmares for a year and a half every single night. I couldn't go to sleep without checking under my bed to make sure there wasn't some passage into the other world and all that shit. I finally watched it again about a year ago and I'm like, why did the Undertaker freak me out? He looks like a man trying to walk in dance toe shoes. I was like, what the fuck?
Because you were a 16-year-old sheltered little Shannon.
I was so sheltered. It was ridiculous.
I think my first R movie was Final Destination. And I remembered being scared of trains because there's one scene in it that a car gets hit by a train and the protagonists get out just in time. But there's a piece of shrapnel underneath the train and the train wheels catch it and it and cuts somebody's head off. And from that time forward, I was fucking terrified of trains. I was 10 years old or whatever when it happened, when I saw it. But that was my first, there's a movie on. Oh, I'm going to sit down and watch it. Oh, what's happening? Watching this R movie. First one that I willingly went to that I was like, this is an R movie. I'm going to go watch it was Doom. And it was, that was a wonderful experience for a little video game freak Bryce at 14 years old when that movie came out.
Was that the one with Carl Urban and The Rock?
And The Rock, absolutely.
I like that one. That was
a great
fun.
movie.
I had a missionary companion that really wanted to watch that movie because it had come out while we were out. And he had it on DVD and I wasn't going to watch it with him, but I let it happen. We went to the chapel during P-Day because I needed, why did we do that? It's because there was someone in the area that was deaf and I had taken ASL in high school, but I didn't know the missionary vocabulary. So I asked the mission president if I could kind of brush up on the missionary vocabulary and watch the discussions on VHS. You have a cat behind you, Tyler.
Yay! We've been waiting for
We
somebody's
love
cat.
kitties.
So
Yes.
I'm just trying to like do my study, and he's like, okay. He got another TV and was like, he was about ready to go home. Like it was right before Halo 3 came out, and he was like pumped for it, and I still had another year to go. I was like, whatever, dude.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, there's
I
the
still
cat.
haven't seen that movie. I've heard that it was kind of underwhelming, and Doom was a huge part of my childhood. I learned how to make mods for it. It led me into my career in IT. I've actually circled back on one of the original 3 credited programmers on the original Doom 1. He popped up in one of the technology like assistant chat rooms that I participate in, and I helped him solve a problem.
Wow.
So
That's
that was a
super
lot
cool.
of fun.
Wow.
And actually, I just rebought that game today on the Switch because it was on sale, and I'm like, okay, I'll own a 5th copy of Doom. Why not? I probably still have my first
Great
copy
franchise.
on 5 floppy disks, but I probably only have 3 of them.
Okay, Tyler, introduce your cat.
I let him back out, but
Ah.
his name is Samwise. He's orange and he's a jerk. So
He's big too.
He
yeah,
is.
he was
That's
like
a-
10 pounds when we got him, and now he's like 16. So
That's awesome. That is too fun.
Bit
What
of a
made you
lot.
name him Samwise? Just out of curiosity.
sorry, say again.
Why Samwise? Out of curiosity.
So I have a bearded dragon right over here. His name is Smog.
Good.
And then our
Yay.
dog is Bo, short for Boromir, and so his name is Samwise.
Awesome. I don't know if I've mentioned this because I know I talked about how my first child, my son, only lived for 2 weeks. We gave him Samwise as a middle name. His name was Stephen Samwise Grover. And so that's just, I'm like, of course we had to name him that. I mean, Samwise is the true hero of Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
Frodo might have carried the ring, but Sam made sure it got there. All right. Tyler wants to know if we've heard of Porter's Fire. Yes, we have. I just haven't tried it yet.
Brought some
There you
Now-
go.
Am I right in hearing it's spicy?
prayer on the back.
Well, no, hang on. Answer my question first. Tyler, is Sweet Fireball an apt description?
Never had
Okay.
Fireball, so I don't know.
Jeff, you're
Yes.
nodding. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I just
There you
listened to your episode, finished it today, and I was nodding along when you were talking about how it was Sweet Fireball. Yes.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
good. It's so,
Because
so,
I mean,
so good.
Fireball is, of course, cinnamon whiskey. I don't know if you can read it if it shows it backwards, which this is the one whiskey I actually have is this. And I like to add it to my coffee because I will drink anything I can add to my coffee.
Right.
But this does make me feel like I'm going to breathe fire. So yeah, Porter's Fire, I do want to try out. I just need to get to a liquor store.
Let's just say Fireball is good for shots. Porter's Fire is good for sipping.
There we go.
I
Yes.
agree. I need to order more of that.
Yeah.
I can
That's
have
a-
it shipped to my house.
All
'cause
I
I'm
can
not in
tell is
Utah.
it's a Utah specialty, right? I think it's only
Yeah.
sold there.
Probably.
No, it's
No,
actually
you can.
cool.
So I order it from a company in California that's a
Oh.
distributor for it, and the distributor in California has a license to ship to the state that I live in.
Oh, okay. Good to know. All right.
Okay. Tyler, you get it where? Or do you want to say?
It's like I've never been to a Utah liquor store that doesn't have Porter's Fire, but when I tried to find it online, they didn't have it. So I called the guy and they said they don't ship it online anymore. So
Ah.
I was gonna send some to like one of you guys, but I thought it'd be creepy to try to find your address, so I didn't do that.
I will totally give you my address if you want to send it to me.
Yeah, send it.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Tyler,
Bathe in Porter's Fire. Yes,
bet.
please.
So it's GA Craft Spirits that I have used in the past.
okay. Of course, I don't know if they can ship to Utah.
yeah. Is
They
the GA
cannot.
for Georgia though?
Great American.
Great America. Okay.
Oh. Well, at least it's not maggot. Okay.
They have a bunch of flavors too. I think Porter's Fire is the original, but they have like 5-6 different flavors that are not just the straight stuff. So
The apple
The
is
peach
awesome.
is really good.
The peach, I hated the peach. I thought
I
it was
don't
a
like
flavor
fake
that did not
peach.
synergize, but I like the apple. The apple's really
Yeah.
good.
I
So
don't
I-
like fake peach scent. So
I
taste.
talked to my Nevermo coworkers at my current job because we're all remote, we said we need to have a summit. I said, let's go to Salt Lake. And that's when I said hello and had dinner with Shannon. But I took a couple of my colleagues to Whiskey Street in Salt Lake. And I hadn't been there since I was a believer. And I had just wandered with a group of work folks from a conference and had a lot of fun, not drinking, but it was even more fun while drinking.
Yeah.
That's a great place. They have like Brigham's history with alcohol on the menu. It's awesome.
Wasn't there an entire wagon of his that carried his still work and everything? Yeah.
Arguably
Yeah,
the
I
only
went to
reason he went to save the Martin Willie Hancock company.
That's right.
Yeah. I went to a bar a few weeks ago, and they have an advertisement for Porter's Fire, and they make his eyes like glowing. It's super creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pistol Packin' Porter,
took
if
a
you
picture
have
of
not seen the 1940s film production Brigham Young, you have to see it. Joseph Smith is played by Vincent Price. And Porter Rockwell, I don't know who played him, but there's a courtroom scene that's just totally not even connected to anything real. But Pistol Packin' Porter sitting there in the courtroom with two pistols just in his hands. He's just like, oh, yeah, like, that sounds good. Yeah, like, whatever.
I'm
the
totally
whole time
allowed
he just
to
has
do
them
this.
drawn. It's amazing.
Media of great price.
There we
Let's
go.
do it, Shannon.
There's also one where
I have a way for you to
Brigham
watch
Young-
my copy if you need it.
Oh,
I'd have to
hey.
take you up on that.
Yeah, let's do
We'll
that.
talk off air.
Yeah. There is one where Charlton Heston got to play Brigham Young. I'm trying to remember what film that was.
That's a delightfully terrible movie. That's what I did for the GAM not
it?
2020, but 2020. It was
Okay.
GAM. And it is a delightful movie. A movie produced by Mormons that I'm convinced they had plenty of ex-Mormons in the writing room.
Is it The Avenging
hilarious.
Angel from
That's right,
1995?
yep. The Avenging Angel. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my
Charlton
gosh.
Heston.
And
Oh,
it's so
God.
clear when you watch it, they had Charlton Heston for one afternoon. That's it. Very clearly.
Yeah. His mention of it in his autobiography is like one paragraph. Yeah. Things like 10 Commandments and Ben-Hur are like entire chapters, but some of them are just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a 1912, 1914, I can't remember the exact year. It's an exploitation film called Polygamy, and it's supposed to portray like the underbelly of Mormonism. And I haven't been able to find a copy, but it
That's
sounds
funny.
interesting.
Oh, God.
I know
Okay.
very little about it beyond that.
Yeah. So one other question from Tyler is, what do your spouses think of the podcast?
Ooh. My spouse, Annie, is glad that I have a creative outlet for all of my ex-Mormon rage.
Yes. And that you have a co-host that understands what you're talking about, so
Exactly.
you can rage at me when you're off the air.
Yeah. Well, that's a big part of it too, because
Yeah.
Annie grew up without any religion whatsoever, so she doesn't understand a lot of this world. She understands what I tell her about it, but she doesn't empathize with it and like have a deep understanding of like a religious trauma shared experience through it. But she does understand that this is part of my understanding the process and understanding my own history and my own past. And she is glad that I have this avenue and this productive outlet for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it helps too, because I understand a lot of the culture. My husband is actually pretty well with it, and he's out. I'm trying to think when it happened. I don't think I could have joined the podcast before he came out. I don't think he would have been able to handle that, because when I first talked to him about not believing in the church anymore, he asked me not to speak out publicly against the church. And it was later that he was able to relax on that one. And so that was rather good, because this is too good of an outlet for me. And I would have had a hard time having to hold to that. But yeah, so that's been helpful. He listens to it at times. And all of the miracle forgiveness ones he had to skip. And especially ones where I was telling some of the hardships for me because that was just too much for him. He has an intense amount of rage against my mission president, and which is rather validating to me at times to have somebody else react that way. Bryce did too, and that helped a lot. It's hard. All of you who've served missions understand what I'm talking about. Is hard, especially as a female, though, to sit there and say, no, this man who was supposed to be my spiritual leader was an abusive asshole who damaged me personally in horrific ways. And this is long running, and it was hard for me to recognize that, because then that's another thing of having to recognize, this is somebody who was called of God. So therefore, the damage he caused, that speaks out against the church rather than for it. But anyway, yeah. So what are our aspirations for the podcast?
Ooh, 1 million subscribers.
Yeah, there we go.
Wow. Realistic, have more subscribers tomorrow than we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's very simple model that doesn't actually guide the content of the podcast.
No, it doesn't. But on the other hand, I mean, there's a lot of things we project to do. I think we've sort of changed it just a bit since the beginning. Yeah. And in fact, we really do need to do a new episode 0 explaining the podcast. But I think that we have a little bit different focus. Some of the things that we talk about have been really good, because we're not necessarily hitting all the headlines of all the shitty stuff going on in Mormonism, but more like we're taking the deep dive into it to explain why this headline happened, as well as these deep dives into the different leaders. I mean, Julie also asked the question, what has been your favorite episode to do so far? And some of these, like the John C. Bennett one, or this last one about McConkie and stuff, these have been really fun, looking at a leader in the church who has had a big effect, like with McConkie. And I think there's some of these, it would be nice to do a huge deep dive like that into, and to explain some of what we know of the church, of 20th century Mormonism, because McConkie was a big deal. He died when I was in high school. And so, that was, or McCranky, as somebody said to me, Trev Stevens said that to me, and I'm like, that's what we need to call it, McCranky. McCranky. Thank you, Trev. But yeah, that's kind of the directions to take with it. These deep dives into the books are fun as fuck. And I mean, Miracle of Forgiveness was painful, but it was also like, digging the infection, the deep infection out of a wound, and so now things can heal a little bit better. That's what it felt like for me anyway. And a long running wound from that fucking book. So, but McCranky is a little bit different, and I'm going to try not to go quite as extreme.
Can that just be his nickname?
Yes, that's good.
It is now.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Trev.
Trev. Yep. Crown Trev with the achievement. Yep.
Yeah.
Giving us a nickname.
Trev's awesome.
Yeah, I similarly favorite episodes. Mormon Money is something that I took a lot of pride in, because it was just so much prep work. I'm pleased with the timing, pleased with the result of it, and it was just something that I it's an achievement that I'm proud of. So those are, I think those will probably stand forever as my favorite episodes of this podcast until we do something more fun. So with that said, the past months of doing Miracle of Forgiveness have been a cloud over me. They have been, I mean, Shannon, like, you saw this a lot more than the listeners did, but it was a very demoralizing exercise. And to be able to be done with it, like a couple of weeks ago with the John Bennett episode, right after we were done recording, Shannon and I spent like 5 minutes just like, that was a fun episode.
We did.
I haven't had that much fun in a long time. And this Bruce McConkie episode similarly was just fun. Like, these are really fun episodes that are a refreshing break away from the tragedy that was the miracle of forgiveness. That was frankly a hard goddamn book to get through.
Yeah.
So to be done with it is very relieving. And it also inspires more energy and interest back into the podcast for me personally. When it's not fun to do, it's not fun to do. And it's hard to do it. And that's what all of the Miracle of Forgiveness episodes were. But now that we're into a completely different subject matter for the long form reviews, and that kind of also unlocks the main segment, because with Miracle of Forgiveness, we did try and tie the main segment in topically with the subject material of that segment of Miracle of Forgiveness. So now to have every month, we don't have to do that shit book anymore. And we don't have to do a main segment that's tied to that shit portion of that shit book. It just makes it feel so much more fun. It feels so much happier. And oddly enough, that's really my goal at the end of the day, is to have fun. I'm here to have fun. And it is fun. And it's also great that it's a rewarding exercise when other people enjoy the fun that we have. And now this piece of shit, which is on the ground next to my desk right now, because it turns out this is a surprisingly good fly swatter. Now that we're done with that, I'm breathing fresh life into my own work in doing research and doing main segments and everything. And it feels good to be back on track again, and to be back having the goal in sight of, let's get together every couple of weeks, let's have fun, and then let's get back on our way doing what we do every day. So
yeah. I think also, one aspiration really is, can we help people that are moving out of Mormonism?
Yeah.
And do we give them something else to think about? I neither one of us has ever been interested in covering the current scandals of the moment, or creating a current scandal of a moment or whatever in anything, because I don't think that's very helpful. But looking at things and doing a deep dive and giving people a perspective to look at helps a lot. I think it's been good. And so if we are helping somebody else with that, helping them work through the trauma of trying to leave this, or having a faith crisis, or trying to figure out how they're going to deal with all of this stuff with the church, it's worth it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So final question here. And this
final question.
Yeah, from Rick. I think that's all of them in here. Oh, wait, no, 2 final questions. Let me make sure I covered all the others. Okay. Julie wants to know about any Sunstone presentations this year.
Shannon and I discussed a topic that we think would be a good presentation at Sunstone. We have yet to submit it, but we think it would be a really fun presentation to do, and would be a good fit. We'll see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about you? Anything? Do you want to talk about what you're doing?
It's not accepted. So I did submit for a presentation to Sunstone. It is hoping to be a next extension of the previous presentation last year that we did. So hopefully that'll be a lot of fun. But I don't want to reveal details until it's approved of. And similarly with the presentation that you and I discussed doing, I don't want to throw it out there and put it into the ether without it.
Which presentation was the one last year?
That
3
years ago, really. Last year you didn't have one.
That's right, 2020. Because last year I was moving across the country, and I didn't want to put together a Sunstone presentation while I was moving across. Yeah.
Whether you present or not, or we present or not, are you still going to be there?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. All right. Yep. I will be there because I live here and stuff, but we'll be there regardless. So that'll at least help, because I had a hell of a lot of fun at that.
And I think it would be totally reasonable to do another Patreon hangout, and do a get together as well. So we'll put some plans into motion as well.
For sure.
We'll have to do that again.
Yeah,
that was way fun.
So fun. Yeah, it's so much fun.
So yeah.
Okay. One final thing. Rick says, in the spirit of all dressed up and nowhere to go, Was there some special golden question you were primed and raring to answer last time or this, but no one asked it?
Good question, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the blank check question, right?
That is. What question was I hoping somebody would ask? It's actually addressed to you, but I'm also thinking about it.
It's for, I mean, it is for both of us. Of course, nothing comes to mind. Of course, nothing like jumps to immediate attention.
I don't, I'm trying to think.
What upcoming whiteboard topic are you most excited about?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Upcoming future episode. And my answer to that is the hymn rewrite episode.
Should we tell them when we're going to do it?
Excited. Yeah, for just
we want to do this
exclusive
for
listeners.
episode 100.
That's right.
That'll be our hymn parody. And for media of great price, I was talking to Bryce today about the books I want to do, and they're going to be hilarious and they will make you all laugh. And I really hope everybody goes and buys them, because this comic, there's a little bit of a hint there, is one that everyone should have, because it just satisfies all the snarky needs. And it's not one we've already talked about before, like Joseph Smith in space. Okay. Which everybody needs to buy that if you haven't already, by the way. But anyway, yeah, so that's one we're having fun with. I had some fun ideas with a poor wayfaring man of grief. I keep hearing this line of McConkie and Benson, so that gives you a thought.
There's a nugget there. There's something good.
All of you patrons heard some of the others, but yeah, so we have that coming up for episode 100, which will be after general conference.
Speaking of that discussion on the patron segment, if you could hide to collab, I've realized like a month ago that it was written by one of my favorite composers that I played in high school and high school band. It was Ralph Vaughan Williams. He did stuff like Molly on the Shore and 17 Come Sunday. So now that I know that he wrote the tune for If You Could Hide a Collab, it's even like double ruined for me now.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful tune itself.
Yeah, it's become, I can't handle it at the moment.
No,
but yes,
that's okay.
I agree.
That's one, the tune is, I mean, there's very few written in a minor key in the hymn book, and that one's in a Dorian mode, no less, which is even better. And it's so beautiful. That's one I've always loved it, just because of the sound of it.
I think the hymn book says contemplative.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that one is a good one. There's some in there that have just really nice tunes, but there's some like Come Come You Saints that I'm like, oh, it drags forever. And there's another one that whenever people sing it, they always sing it so slow. And when I was a music director in sacrament meeting, I'd be like to the organist going, this is the beat we're going. I don't give a shit how cool.
Yeah, that
everybody sings. I'm like, give it.
It wasn't until I was in the MTC and there was some hymn that everyone just started slowing down. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh,
there's no RIT in the music here.
Yeah.
And no one knew what that meant.
I had a great organist when I was the sacrament meeting music director of my last ward, because she followed me, and which is great. Most of the time, the directors have to follow the organist. She followed my every movement, and so it was great because she would play it the way I wanted it played. So, but yeah, there's some of those. What is it now? I'm trying to think what it is. It's 2 pages in there, and everybody always plays it too slow. God, I'll think of it 5 minutes after we close out this thing. If I do, I will put a note in the patron thing saying this one. Yeah. Okay. Give me a minute. It's not High on a Mountaintop. It's something else.
So, well, you know, you're already giving me plenty of ideas. If I could get high on collab, high on a mountaintop, come on, right? So I have plenty to work with for my episode 100. But Shannon,
what?
Rick asked the question, what question should have been asked to you?
To me.
What do you think?
I was thinking about that.
Well, while you're thinking on that, we have one more
Actually-
chat or one more question in the YouTube chat. I'm glad somebody asked this. Finally getting to the bottom of these issues. Darren asks, ND2, RF, or topless? Obviously topless. ND2 and ND1 especially being underpowered doesn't need any more weight, and when you add all of the retractable mechanical pieces that have to lift up that hood, pull the top back, and then drop down the cover of it, you're adding so much weight to an already dramatically underpowered car. You have to go with just the standard convertible. The RF messes up the weight distribution of the car. It increases the top weight, which increases, lean in corners. It's just a huge problem. Do not get the RF, and it robs your trunk space. Who wants that? It's got to be standard, old school, conventional convertible. Sorry, that's the right answer. There's no contest. The RF might be convenient, but no, you got to go topless.
Do you have a turbo on yours?
No, I would love to do it. What I would love to do more than anything is a 13B swap. I think that'd be so much fun. But, those are all Miata questions. That was a Miata question. So
good, because it was like.
Yes, that's the motion the convertible top makes. Yes, good job, Shannon. You know
I'm
what we're
putting a
talking
roll
about.
bar on mine this month when it's going to get here in a week or two. Freight.
Are you installing it yourself?
I'm going to try.
You crazy bastard. All right, good luck.
It said, if you know what you're doing, it'll take 8 hours. If you
Yeah.
don't know what you're doing, it might take 16 hours. So I'm going to plan for like 4 weeks. I mean, none of it looks difficult. It just looks obnoxious. And I'll sit there and stare at the same bolt for about 6 hours when I try to figure out what to do next.
Is it
that's what it's going
Bulldog?
to be.
Bulldog brand?
It's a Hard Dog 2.
Hard Dog, that's what it is.
M2. Yeah.
With the
Single
Hard Dog that I
diagonal.
got, they had to actually cut part of the chunk out of the shelf where it bolts down through the shelf into the frame. They had to cut out circles out of that sheet metal, and I was too scared to do that myself.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see when it gets here. What
Let me know.
will
Keep me
happen.
posted.
Yeah.
All right, Shannon, what question should have been asked?
I don't really have one for today. I mean, I did last time, which is I wanted to show what I did when I done the whole congregation and stuff. That, and also why I love Jane Austen, and I just kind of created that for myself. So I was like, I'm just gonna answer that. She asked me a Jane Austen question. I'm just gonna segue into that because I feel like it. But I think those are the main ones. I'll think of probably something else 5 minutes after we finish. 27 minutes after we finish it.
27 minutes.
There we go. Why is 27 my favorite exaggeration number? That's a question nobody's asked me. Ask me that question.
Why is 27 your favorite number, Shannon?
Because it's 3 times 9, so it's divided by 3 and a 3, and because it just sounds cool. It's better than, just any other number. So anytime I'm exaggerating, I say 27 or I say 27,000. And if the number actually is 27, then I have to say it is actually 27, because then otherwise everybody thinks I'm exaggerating. So, if you hear Shannon say 27, there we go. 3 cubed. Thank you. Thank you for that, Will. I was like, I know I'm saying it wrong. What is it that I'm not saying right? Got it. It's the Trinity Godhead confirmed. It's my signature number.
That's right.
There we go. I am Trinity Godhead. But I don't own anything leather or vinyl or whatever the fuck it was that she wore. Anyway, movie reference, The Matrix, Trinity.
Oh, that Trinity. Okay, I got
God.
you. My God, wow, I'm way behind.
God.
And then she says, what? In the first one, anytime everyone goes God or Jesus, she's like, huh?
What? Yes. Okay. Right. Anyway.
I didn't know that.
It is. That's just my favorite exaggeration number. So very few times is it actually correct. Like when I posted yesterday at 3:00 in the afternoon and said, we're going to be on in 27 hours. So anyway, I keep hoping we'll have 27 questions on one of these, maybe next time.
Then like what the space-time continuum will just fold in on itself.
I will become God.
27. 27 is both real and not real.
Yeah, there we go. Anyway.
Awesome. All right. Yes, we are in a simulation, Will. And yes, I agree. Darren, the RF does look better, but looks are not everything when performance is on the line. But that's going to do it for all of our Q's and A's. This was a lot of fun. Yes. All of our patrons who asked all of the awesome Q's and all of our patrons who joined us on the actual live stream. This was a lot of fun. Shannon and I, of course, want to thank you all so much. Not only for posting your questions, but also for supporting the show. It really, I mean, it means a lot to us. It's feedback that you like what we're doing, and you know, we'll keep doing what you like and what we like, because it's what everybody likes. And you know, this is a nice show of support. So we really, really do appreciate it so much. Any final closing thoughts, Shannon?
No, just thank you, everybody. This is something that we look forward to so much. I was so happy when you patrons reached the goal so that we could do these, because we love talking to people. It's more fun when we have your faces right in front of us when we talk to you too.
Yes, very much so.
Bryce, can you offer the benediction? Don't forget to bless the refreshments.
Yes, bless the refreshments that they nourish and strengthen our bodies.
Dear Holy Mushroom, we thank you for our high fidelity, fast internet streaming.
No, you got to do the Mormon tone. We thank you for our fidelity.
We didn't have a closing hymn though. Where's our closing hymn?
You get high on Kolob.
We thank you for giving us
ask the shock top to nourish and strengthen our liver, and say these things in the name of Rexus. Ramen. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.